It's kind of
the following.
because, Rob, you were in this very, very popular, I suppose, show on Netflix that everyone watches, but then all of a sudden you're talking about this kind of completely anti-popular thing that people are like, well, why is he all of a sudden talking about this?
Well, you can see that, I mean, the reason why people follow me is because, my practice and my practice philosophy is is not mainstream, is not conventional, kind of, spatial organization, or that wisdom that's kind of pushed by institutions like, universities. I kind of have given a few talks recently at various institutions only because I was invited by the student body. I was suggesting that the students leave the institution. I mean, like, that was the basis of my conversation, and talked about crypto as a way, because they're in those institutions becoming debt slaves,
Mm.
and the education is substandard, and I'm just kind of trying to, I can see this, and I'm just trying to kind of offer a way through, or a way of kind of managing their future, without being totally kind of, um, controlled or a slave to their, to their repayment schedule.
You see, I'm really glad that you've brought Robert on, and I can see why you've done this immediately, because there's a lot of kind of resonating kind of opinions with myself in terms of my mindset. Can I ask you, Robert, like, do you feel that the metaverse has a strong potential to be a catalyst for disruption in education?
Yes, I do, but of course, and the metaverse is it's that decentralized space. But it's curious because I had a really interesting meeting last week with one of the kind of big movers in the crypto space way back. The kind of the early movers, and I was having this conversation about the value. I guess the question is, what is the metaverse for?
Oh, don't ask that, Rob.
Don't ask me that question.
Yeah.
What is a metaverse?
Right.
Will take me all day to answer.
No, but what's its purpose? Because it's like, it's, for me, it's like there's the universe and there's the metaverse, and people who are uncomfortable in their universe, are trying to find a place that they're comfortable in the metaverse.
Mm.
I think because their own reality doesn't they don't feel grounded in their own reality. Okay, and that's because of the world we live in, and because of the spaces we inhabit, because of the urban condition, because of the homes we occupy. They are not healthy spaces to be in.
Mm.
And also because of the relationships thereof, because I think buildings can heal us, but they can destroy relationships
Mm-hmm.
and families. And what we try and do as a species is find another way of feeling comfortable, which is through addiction, perhaps, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's like kind of like people turn to historically turn drink or drugs or whatever, and it's almost like I see that the metaverse as being that place where people kind of retreat to because they don't feel comfortable, or they don't exist within a community that they feel part of, so they retreat to the metaverse. So I feel the metaverse has been created out of the problem of the universe, or of the problems that exist in reality. I'm just wondering what the I was asking these questions in Berlin there, and like, I understand this purpose in education, in simulation. Okay, I think it's great. The technology is great for that. I think it's good as well for. I mean, I'm having a meeting. Like we're talking about having a meeting now in this virtual space. Between my practice and guys in Berlin, be interesting to kind of explore that as a space to meet, to discuss ideas in three dimensions. And so I think there's purpose there. But in terms, so yes, to education. I mean, I'm not a gamer. of course, for the gamers, they kind of like, although I did experience VR proper when I was in Berlin, and like I was like, wow, I mean,
why isn't this mainstream already? Right, it's mind blowing, isn't it? Yeah,
it is really interesting, to kind of experience that. But I don't think it's a substitute for reality.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think that but I'm interested in the decentralization. I'm interested in the blockchain. I'm interested in the decentralization, and I'm not sure how this kind of decentralization or the metaverse can disrupt the world of architecture or the institution. Well, it can certainly disrupt the institutions, but the institutions are holding on so tight because they're they are the body that's kind of trying to put control and on us. That's a whole rabbit hole we go into.
It is a rabbit hole. So let me just quickly intro this show, because we've kind of started in the middle, and that is absolutely...
Yeah, but this is golden content, and we want this.
We like if we start in the middle, that's fine as well. We've got editors; they can.
They're magic, actually.
So hi everyone, welcome to Making a Metaverse. My name is Dan, and as always, this is a show where we break down the process of making a metaverse. We can do that because we are doing it ourselves. Today, we are very excited to have Robert Jamison join us. Robert is a world-renowned architect working on some really creative and cool stuff. Please check out his website. What is it, Rob?
RobertJamisonArchitects.com.
Yeah, there we go. I should have written that down, really, Rob.
It's an old site. It needs updated. But anyway, carry on.
We can do that.
So today we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of decentralization and blockchain. And Rob, I think, having followed your career for a couple of years now and kind of seen you on the telly and different podcasts, things like that, it's clear you kind of sort of touched upon it there. One of your MOs is shying away from convention and kind of pushing back against the norm, perhaps looking ahead to the future a little bit, And I think that's kind of why I think you're the perfect person to come on this show and kind of talk to us. What I'd like to kind of start with, though, is just where does your interest in decentralization kind of stem from? I imagine it's a lot linked to that pushing back against the norms we talked about, but why are you interested in this?
Right. So I had a kind of successful practice in Belfast, and I moved out to London in 2007. And I was working in London. My work was getting published. I was winning competitions. I was building projects, and I had staff. And then, of course, the crash came of 2008, 2009, and I couldn't sustain the practice. And I remember working on a building site 3 days a week to be able to close my practice, to pay staff. But anyway, so I closed my practice, and that was it, 2009. And I spent the next kind of years, 6-7 years as a bit of a nomad, traveling and exploring the world as an architect, and having this kind of way of thinking about the world and looking at the world. And I only set up my practice 2.0 in 2019, following this work on, with your home made perfect. So in between, there's this kind of period where it was a period of research, a period of kind of trying to understand the world we live in. And back in 2008, and as an architect, as a design practitioner, when you engage with a client, and there's a fee structure, the fee pays for the time, okay? As a design practice, you spend time on the design, because the more time you spend on it, the more refined it becomes, the richer the project. So therefore, you don't make any money. And I was kind of like, it was just this constant, like, and it's not that I want to make loads of money. I just want to be comfortable, and I would have to build my own house, and it doesn't happen anymore. Generations ago, as an architect, you could leave university and build your own house. It doesn't happen now. I haven't built my own house, and that's something I want to do. But the point is, I remember then in my journey and kind of trying to understand the world more, sitting outside of the Western kind of convention, I was able to reflect on where I come from and the culture I've been born into and accepted, and really over time I realized that there was a bit of a nonsense in that evolutionary trajectory, and you could see how other people exist in the world, and how maybe in the West it's kind of a really kind of controlled, contrived, constructed paradigm that isn't natural or supportive of health and well-being and need, right? And it was at a time whenever I then discovered a guy called Cliff High. I've mentioned him before on my Instagram page. I don't know if you know about him, but he's this kind of like tech genius. He worked for Microsoft way back whenever, even in the I think the late 80s. But anyway, so he kind of like, he's a linguist, and he discovered this idea, and the idea was that as a collective, as a species, we throw out words that are unusual, but for the support of the species, right, or of the population, of the people, of the group. And he wrote a technology, for web bots that would go out and scan the internet and look at language. And he started to write these predictive linguistics. Okay, now he's also a guy who's a schizotypal. He's a paranoid, so he's been practicing yoga for 60 years, meditation for 40, for Zazen for 40, Vipassana for 30. And I've practiced all of these, and he's also a psychonaut. And I do have been exploring plant medicine for quite some time, for 3 decades, more so recently, in terms of like really getting into the importance of kind of like working with ayahuasca and things like that, there to kind of understand these other, the reality of who we are as a species and the energy beings that we are and how we connect with the universe, right? So, but he was writing these predictive linguistics, and he discovered crypto, Bitcoin, before it even existed, in his predictive linguistics. And I felt that this was because I connected with him on the, I kind of felt that, these ideas that were coming into my reality were valuable. And I started to kind of then research this, and he would write reports on ICOs coming out way back, and because he could read the white papers, and then he started to kind of like publish these reports, and I'd read the reports. I'm thinking, well, this might be a way of me to, that I can maybe build a house one day or have a practice, right? And I started to engage in in this world of crypto, and understand the blockchain and decentralization, because of the impression that that has been on us all as a global population, but also, on Ireland as a place, the oppression here, so this is kind of this idea of being decentralized is a natural way of being, and for me, it's kind of like it makes sense, and I think it's something that we need to pursue collectively as a species and as a global population. I think we are, and I think what everybody's doing, like you guys bringing this to people, is wonderful. My interest then is pushing that how can we decentralize these kind of institutions and these components of my practice. Like, so for example, I had an idea recently, was how do we privatize the planning system, right? Because the planners are an absolute nightmare, right? Because they don't understand, they can't engage, in my opinion, in architecture, because you engage with junior planners and you need people who are more experienced to kind of discuss projects or discuss architecture, and it doesn't exist. So I had this idea, how do we privatize or privatize the planning system? And I had this conversation with a friend who works within government organizations, and he said, Robert, you can't privatize the planning system because it's so corrupt. There's people making so much out of it, right? Yeah. And then so my question is, how do you decentralize it? And is that possible? All this here, and I don't know, because it's an interesting conversation to have. If it's even possible, how decentralization can come to these existing institutions, So that's my interest. That's how I got into it. And my interest was in the idea of kind of like crypto, and trying to find a way to kind of have passive income to sustain a practice that is arguably a practice and a school. I'd like to create a school ultimately, if that is the ambition. But I think crypto can do that, and I think the decentralized kind of future can allow that to happen.
I suppose you like the idea of the transparency that comes with what you talked about there, but then feel that is just not possible in that industry, and it will never potentially happen. Is that one of the main challenges, that no one's going to be transparent, and no one wants to be transparent because it exposes everything?
Yeah, it is, but as Buckminster, I cite Buckminster Fuller a lot. He was a great inventor and genius, architect, engineer of the mid-20th century. He said, don't fight the existing paradigm, create the new to render the existing obsolete. And I think that we are creating the new, and we can forget about the existing. I even think, like, how do we, like even in terms of planning, how do they define home, and how can we kind of like subvert that meaning and create something that allows us to exist, without outside of these regulations and legislation, And and I think that once you understand common law and all of that, I think you can do that very successfully. But that's a whole other kind of area of expertise that one would need to understand before you can actually subvert.
I love that a lot of your questions are often rooted in the deeper questions around the, asking what it means to be something. And obviously for me, a lot of my kind of, I would say, foundation of understanding comes from a lot of what I've kind of learned, experienced and read. And obviously being quite a strong, I would say, aficionado for philosophy myself, I know a lot of kind of the questions that you're asking are also rooted in those more important questions that we need to get the root of, which are around, for example, what does it actually mean for something to be a home? And, how can we collectively agree on that? And obviously you talk about linguistics there as well. And I think, all of this ties back to a lot of kind of postmodernist philosophy around, binary opposites. And with look at, say, for example, Saussure, when he talks about, people signified versus signifier. And obviously I don't want to necessarily, analyze, the postmodernist philosophy and what you're saying here. But the root questions that you're talking about, I think, are really critical in order for us to kind of understand whether we can, disrupt existing paradigms that you're talking about here to redefine how, we progress forward. And I think a lot of what you're saying to me is it resonates a lot, because what you're essentially saying is decentralization is a state of mind as a result of experience and learning that you've acquired throughout your time. And there is a connection, a collective, a group of people now who also buy into that mindset. But whereby there's already existing paradigms that exist for every industry, the question is, how do we bring people into this way of thinking and understanding why, this has got so much strength and potential for the individual and the collective, right?
Yeah, I think the short answer is psychedelics. Because in psychedelics you start to understand the world you live in, away from the social structures that surround us and that we have to engage with, and that's kind of that's kind of a bit of an offhand comment, but I think that once you kind of understand who we are as a species, and the environment, the environment that we exist within, and the bodies that exist within this environment, the energy body, the physical body, the emotional body, and how it kind of and when you start to see kind of the life around us in terms of the natural world, and how we connect with that, I think it's very. I think then through a series. I guess in my personal experience, through a series of epiphanies or realizations, you kind of see that how we live is just so unnatural. Even the square box rooms that we live in, and there's architects who are winning awards for building these whether homes or apartments or places that we live and dwell that are unhealthy for us, and yet their architecture is celebrated because they exist within that paradigm that is kind of understands that to be the way that we should be living, because it all comes back from the Greeks and the ancient Western civilization, which is all corrupted. The thing about it is, they say that our history is written by the victors,
Mm-hmm.
and and even the way we should be living is written by the victors, and it's all a means of destroying community relationships, and and
empire.
And we've known that in the past couple of years, what's been going on, and and even what's happening at the moment. Dare I say, the need to get away from the institutions, in terms of even schools of art or the institution of architecture, the Royal British the Royal Institute of British Architecture, you know, they are pushing this kind of like climate paradigm, which is kind of like a false narrative, and yet as a practicing architect within, you know, as part of the institution, or being a registered architect, you have a certain code of conduct which is about kind of being having an ethical, moral responsibility towards your client, but understanding this kind of responsibility to understand the world we live in, and then to support the client, and to build a space that is nurturing and healing, and provide shelter against what our institution is driving, or trying to force us to kind of create, which is pushing a whole other narrative, which is the whole carbon nonsense and all this shit, you know, is coming at us, you know. So it's like the world is so at odds, you know, in terms of like, and it's just the oppression is getting more and more, and people see that. You can see like people are waking up to it all, you know, and you know, so but people shouldn't be retreating to the metaverse because of that.
Agreed.
We need to fight reality and enjoy the metaverse, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because the metaverse is it's got wonderful potential, I think, you know, but the decentralization of our society, I think, can happen just with this kind of greater kind of collective wisdom, you know, that can assist.
Yeah,
I think you guys are like, you know, and others are kind of the, you know, the early adopters and the first movers in this space, and it's wonderful. But it's almost like very soon, I mean, you know, with what's happening, you know, I think more and more people will move into this, into the metaverse. But we need to not ignore the reality and just try and escape, you know.
Guys, I'll ask you both, why do people kind of resist decentralization? Like, I think, Robert, you kind of touched upon how people kind of choose these safe spaces, and I guess that's easier spaces for people to live in. It's no real change, and it sort of sticks within the normal kind of like the narrative that people want to push. So why do people? It's obviously clearly, you know, ownership, sort of the ownership piece. There's the you know, you can obviously see into the sort of transparency as well. And if we look at like the music industry, for example, with decentralization, right, you've got at the moment, you've got the rumors where these kind of big companies are releasing tickets and buying them themselves and then kind of reselling them again for kind of profit. And then the consumer just loses out. And then you've got Spotify, which are like streaming these songs and the artists are not getting paid. There's obviously lots of clear kind of benefits for kind of blockchain and centralization in that. You know, why are we resisting it? Is it all coming down essentially to people wanting to stay in the power and keep safe?
Can I just answer that pretty quickly?
Yeah, please.
Because I think that people are not resisting it. It's so difficult. I mean, to actually get into, even to have a wallet and to have a crypto wallet, the addresses you need, the you know, you need to copy it again and put it somewhere safe, and then maybe emboss it onto something and etch it onto something else. And you've got all these addresses and, you know, passwords and everything like that. It's a difficult kind of process to get into, even to get your head around. You know, it's hard to do. You need to spend time, you need to dedicate time to it. And most people are just running around trying to, you know, pay mortgages and taxes, and they're just kind of. Which isn't an accidental kind of process, you know, it's being kind of, again, it's a control mechanism. But the issue with getting into this blockchain technology is the process of getting in the physical kind of what you need to do. Interestingly though, you know, there's you probably know of Luxo. Luxo is that, you know, it's this new technology which is one like universal kind of identity, which gets rid of all of that.
Yeah,
you know, it gets rid of all of that difficulty in, you know, in actually accessing the space using one kind of connection technology, how you would if you were kind of engaging with your Instagram account or something. So it simplifies it, and I think that it's that will allow people the opportunity to kind of engage with the technology that they don't yet understand, As well as that, it's also education. People don't, yet know the potential of what the blockchain is or what it can do. But it's something that kind of I think there's a difficulty. I think in terms of that move into this space, and also the potential of what it can be or what it can do, and also the propaganda.
100%. Yep. You're 100%.
It's just everywhere. The propaganda, and then people think of it. You speak to people in the street or friends, and you talk about crypto and you talk about Bitcoin. They say, I had a conversation with a guy in a shop recently who was paying with a credit card, and I was paying with cash. He said, "Oh, well, I wouldn't pay with cash. It's disgusting. It's it's dirty money." I'm like, "Oh, right, okay." So it's that door handle, but anyway, he said, "Yeah." And also, I said, "What about?" I just threw it out there. What about crypto? What are you aware of Bitcoin? He says, "Oh yeah, I'm an economist." I'm like, "Oh, interesting." I said, "So do you hold Bitcoin?" He says, "No, so that's for pedophiles." Those were his words.
Oh my God.
That's for pedophiles and drug dealers. Those were his words. And I'm like, you actually don't know what you're talking about. And I talked about transparency. I talked about being a safe way to kind of, my method of exchange. But the propaganda has kind of impacted, the very people who call themselves economists. So I think there's an issue there.
And educated, apparently. As an economist, you would expect, the ability of to actually question one step further than the headline one that you read, right? Which, as we know, since probably the early noughties now, you may have aware of a gent called Nick Davies. He wrote a thesis where he called basically journalism, he called it churnalism, fairly widely accepted terminology now to describe what is effectively just the churn of news. And there's been mass studies which even indicate that I think it's way in excess of 80% even of H1s, headline ones, right, are actually factually incorrect. Beyond that, journalists' role now has essentially evolved from, going out and actually fact checking and doing background research, getting person-to-person quotations, from actually just buying stories from their mates and then regurgitating whatever information that they probably haven't checked themselves, because it's all about the amount of engagements we can get through social media, because that's what creates the revenue. So a journalist role now is and this has been 20 years, this the estate of what it is has now become. So it would quite literally be really easy for me to pay somebody a couple of K to write an article which is completely bad-mouthing another company or product in order to illuminate our company or product in a more positive light. So you're 100% accurate that there is a lot of people with a lot of agendas that would pay, journalists, publications, whatever it may be, to to essentially put out there on the internet certain narratives. And because, unfortunately, we understand the human condition, the amount of content, there's just this flood of information coming to users nowadays. Again, essentially, I've read something which indicates that the average attention span for people when they are browsing the internet or looking at news is around 6 seconds. So again, over 90% of individuals do not read past the headline or the first couple of lines of that article. So how can you, gather any sort of meaningful understanding of anything, and especially with something which has essentially got some complicated, kind of concepts in blockchain and decentralization, bringing people from what the current state is right now to that is the challenge. And I think you're absolutely right. Fake news and media is totally unhelpful and is counterproductive, because people with that agenda and narrative are going to make money from shorting this. It's a potentially unregular space for now. If they can manipulate it in certain ways to make big financial gain, they will, because that's an individual or a small group of collectives narrative, right? And this is what we're combating ultimately. So yeah, I totally agree. Fake news, education, two massive problems. And again, Robert, you referenced there user experience, and I think this is something that since building 2017, we've been aware as a major barrier to users. You're exactly right. People, struggle to remember the passwords for their email, never mind writing 25, 24 word seed phrases down and then understanding the importance of you being your own bank. So, this is something that we've been looking to address as a company, as a product with custodial wallets, which are not necessarily a new thing, which is, log in with your email, log in with Facebook or social media. But the challenge is that lots of companies are rolling out their own custodial wallets because, if I am to use your custodial wallet stack, if something goes wrong from a security perspective, it impacts my 100,000 users or whatever. So you're then going to have this a wash of custodial wallets where, the companies are trying to help on board. But if you're needing to use a different custodial wallet across all of these different companies, you hit with the first problem, which you were referencing, Robert, which is I need an Instagram, I need a Facebook, I need a Twitter, I need a Gmail, I need, whatever else, just from a custodial wallet perspective, because you need a different one for each time. So there's a huge amount of challenges. And I think that everything you've said is 100% what I'd agree with. Yeah.
Is true decentralization even possible, guys? I'm going to ask you that question, because will it not still come down to who has the loudest voice influencing the many?
The problem is people follow people, and where there is decentralization, you still require probably a figurehead for people to look to. But this has been proven, throughout the history. I hate using this reference and everybody's going to frown upon me, but, people followed a certain individual that managed to convince the entire nation that nearly took over the whole world. I mean, this goes on throughout the history of time, right? It's not just that one incident. Donald Trump became the president of the United States of America. We had Boris Johnson as the prime minister of the Great Britain. Now, I'm not going to, go too deep into my political affiliations, but, I think if most people would generally consider that they are were not necessarily probably the most skilled or adept people to perform those roles. But they were a character that people could get behind and connect with in that human element. So this is another challenge that you're facing in terms of decentralization, is that you're trying to bring, you need to take people and get them to buy into this idea, but you still need individuals to do this. And ironically, and I'm sure Robert's aware of this, having been involved in the space now for a while, what you'll also see is that people will also follow, for example, groups, even though they will know that group's agenda may be to make themselves money, and the amount of manipulation that has occurred, and yet people still blindly follow an individual or people or groups of people because it's what they know. Like it's hard for a computer program, an algorithm, or a decentralized, or a DAO, for example, to gain the trust of an individual, and that's part of the problem. And I don't know if you'd like to elaborate, Robert. I'm sure you've got your own.
I guess I mean I heard recently about kind of a in a DAO system, or if you had a group who are kind of like involved in a decentralized kind of organization, which is transparent. But it's the voting mechanism that gives those people their positions. I can't remember the name. It's a quad vote, or I can't recall. But it's an organizational voting structure that allows that that when you kind of are the lead voice in an organization, you're only there as long as as long as the those who vote. In fact, it's to do with blockchain technology. I'm actually kind of paraphrasing a conversation I had, but it's to do with blockchain and having a voting system that gives you kind of, rather than one vote, it gives you 20 votes, and you can vote depending on the weight of the issue you're voting against. So it becomes more kind of like not only transparent, but I guess it's a fair way of kind of organizing that space. My question in terms of decentralization of institutions and voting is that there still needs to be experts in the field who need to be respected and understood. But like, what constitutes the expert, right? Or who is the expert? And because I'll go back to planning, for example. To become a planner, I as what I understand in Northern Ireland anyway, you only need, and the UK, you only need a 1-year conversion course from any degree, right? And then that gives them a position where they can, I guess they're just kind of resetting legislation, ticking boxes. It's a ticking boxes exercise, But at what point can we kind of like reach? It's almost like there still needs to be a structure that allows experts in the field to make decisions.
100%.
I mean, it's an interesting point about you follow that single person, but I think what decentralization does is it begins to get rid of the corruption.
Yeah, should diversify.
And the corruption's everywhere, even in it's everywhere. I think though, I feel that society, there's a split, that will take place where those in the in that decentralized space, if you like, or the cryptoverse, or like however you want to say it, will split away from I don't want to say condition, but those who are comfortable within the current paradigm, So I think there'll be a branch, and because currently we're kind of sitting side by side, but something has to shift. I think that what's going to create that shift is whenever there's a collapse of the economy or the collapse of the dollar, and people are kind of like, and banks and bank runs, and people are trying to get their money out, and they've got no other means of exchange apart from those in the crypto space. They have that peer-to-peer technology, and they also maybe have precious metals, and can start to or continue, or it pushes them further into the decentralized, or with this kind of
Can I jump in here as well, Robert? Because there'll be certain people that will watch this and they will go, "Oh, we got another conspiracy theory," right? Just look over recent history. Just don't read the head ones and look a bit deeper into what Robert is saying here, because this is fact, right? Yes, it's a prediction on USD and when that collapses, right? If, when, whatever. But it has happened in recent history with El Salvador. It's happened in Venezuela. Literally, their currencies have crashed to practically worthless. So it is possible, and it can happen. And I mean, I think really, if we look at what the dollar is, originally when the dollar was created, it was backed by gold, like 1-to-1 in weight. And then sometime, and I'm not sure, you may know better than me on this, Robert, but sometime I think in the 50s or 60s, it might have even been JFK, basically turned around and goes, yeah, we're no longer backing it with the dollar now. We just print money as and when we need it. So what's your value?
On the gold off everybody.
Yeah. So people won't believe or see this. They'll just look at this as kind of another one of those kind of, sort of like, the conspiracy or whatever. But there is a tangible, very strong, tangible chance that within our lifetime, there will be something which causes, whereby a great economic crash occurs. I can't agree more.
I think it's, well, I mean, it may not be a crash because of these movers in the crypto space, right?
Yeah.
Because there's still a way of, so it'll not be a Great Depression, but I think it's imminent. And this is just how I feel.
Yeah.
You say in our lifetime, I think it's going to happen pretty quickly because it needs to happen. I mean, and I'm not saying it needs to happen for society. It's the people who are controlling the narrative need to create this collapse so they can introduce central bank digital currency, which is not decentralized, which is a digital currency, which is going to kind of tie everyone to these, to their bank accounts, and they will be kind of. I mean, there are no conspiracy theories, right? Central bank digital currency is real. They need to collapse the dollar to get into it. They want to get everybody into it as a mechanism of control. The World Economic Forum are talking about it. It's not a conspiracy. So it is going to happen, and it's going to happen pretty soon. I'd even say it's going to happen in the next 6 to 12 months, right?
Central bank digital currencies, like you're saying, I know for an absolute fact that they are happening in some of the biggest banks in the world. I know that, and I can't say how or why, and I'm sure you may do as well. And even there's a lot of news about it, which is somewhat accurate and whatever. They are coming. They are coming.
Of course, I mean, eminently. And let me say this: during the whole lockdown saga, right, that whole nonsense, the only people who were out on the street were those who were putting up, the communication systems to allow technology to exist, right? So this something about digital currency is part of this greater. I mean, I'm not. This is not a conspiracy theory. Go and read the World Economic Forum website and these other government websites, and you'll find it all in there, right? But this here technology was kind of like they pushed this out because what they want to do is get this technology coming through, get it tied to your medical, kind of wallet, and all of this here. But as well as that, this idea of the 15-minute cities, right? Just bringing architecture back into it and spatial planning, the 15-minute cities, right? It's not a conspiracy. It's a means of getting you kind of corralled into a space that they can control you. And this is why it's interesting having this conversation about the metaverse, because people will actually, it's almost like they're up in the system. The metaverse is being created, and people will feel comfortable retreating in the metaverse in the 15-minute cities. So they'll be comfortable with this idea of moving in the 15-minute city because they've got the metaverse to move into as well, And I think that there is really problematic, Yeah. And I think that, and that's why I think that we need to understand what the 15-minute cities are. We need to understand why they're doing it. And, they talk about, again, climate change and this carbon hoax. It is a hoax, and also so is the whole climate hoax. They're pushing that, and and this is all the same thing. It's all CBDC, 15-minute cities. Corral you into a space, and then be able to kind of tell you where you're going, where you're spending your money, and if and all of that, all those conspiracies that is indeed, in my opinion, a reality. So I think it's really interesting that how that technology was pushed out and continues to be pushed out. I mean, our roads are being kind of like, there's always kind of some sort of, technology kind of infrastructure has been ongoing and ramped up over these past couple of years, and as part of this whole kind of like push into the central bank digital currency, But anyway, so the 15-minute cities, I think, is a wonderful kind of like conversation to have, because it brings, again, the architecture, urban planning element back into it, So I think it'd be interesting to hear what your thought is on that, because I know Oxford is trying to push for it. I know there's other kind of, other cities. Well, there's many in the US, but, there's other places that are pushing for it. And that's just, I think in Belfast I think there was a vote on happening in Belfast, but
is it a conscious a conscious decision for people to control us here, or is it just happening as a result of society? Is there someone at the top designing these systems and structures and saying, okay, we're going to put every one of these 15-minute cities, everything's really close, we know where they are, we know where they're spending money? Is someone, whenever you talk to someone about this, they go, well, who's making this decision? Or is this just a result of kind of a capitalist society?
Robert may have sort of, stronger opinions than I do. I wouldn't necessarily point to, one or more individuals that are kind of like, the puppet master with all this. But I would say there are cells, there are clusters, there are, conglomerates with huge amounts of kind of wealth, which want to ensure that wealth stays in certain places, that have kind of, reasons to ensure that, things are moving in certain directions. And I think, ultimately it just comes down to, the power and the control of wealth, as it were, really. So, yeah, the more control that you have over any particular system, the more it enables you to, ensure the flow of wealth, right? So I think, maybe Robert would point towards any one particular group or organisation. I don't think he would, but I certainly think that there are.
Can they? The World Economic Forum. I mean, you will own nothing and be happy. That mantra.
Yeah.
It exists. There's been in our space.
Yeah.
We can talk about it. We should be able to talk about it, and we need to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
That's the group who are kind of like, not the puppet masters, because I think there's puppet masters above them who we have no idea who they are or where they live or how they exist, right? But
because they were these with the very, very private people, right? I mean, there's a lot of speak about the Rothschilds and obviously their interests and obviously how their wealth has moved over the years, and often people do sometimes look to them in that kind of way as well. I mean, I totally accept what you're saying, Robert. I think for me, I haven't necessarily made the link up towards certain individuals or groups, but certainly it does not take, I think anyway, personally, too much intellect to understand that the more control a group has, the more that they're able to, control the flow of wealth. Where's the agenda for that? Well, of course, it enhances, and allows them to maintain this level of control. So, I totally get where you're coming from there, and I think that happens.
I sometimes wonder though whether it's just the pursuit of wealth as a kind of culture that ends up in these systems where that kind of control is in the end. I wonder if just because everyone's trying to push towards is getting money, that they kind of naturally occur, these kind of control systems, whether it's rather than being actual people.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I think someone somewhere has to make certain decisions though, as well, because as we know, we talked about, people often follow individuals that are experts in certain fields and whatever. So, I mean, it's no mistake that some of the, I think, wealthiest investors of all time have come out and trash talk Bitcoin all the time. Why is that? What is their agenda? You have to ask these questions. So yeah, I mean, Warren Buffett, he still ironically gets quoted by, people in cryptos, buy low, sell high. When people are crapping themselves, you buy. And when people are like over kind of, zealous in acquiring, that's when you sell. And that was how evidently Warren Buffett made his wealth. Just trash talk Bitcoin since it was worthless, and it's still trash talking it now and will continue for the rest of his life. So, so what is his agenda? Why is he doing that? Like, you have to be able to ask these questions. And he's just one, person that I'm quoting here, but, he's in the public eye. So is he really somebody who is going to be one of the people that are probably constructing these systems? I would say not, but he's probably a little bit of a front man in certain ways, I would guess.
Yeah.
Interesting question always is, who is Satoshi Nakamoto?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think who is it? I mean, you can hear all the conspiracies around that, but of course, there's people who are, like Warren Buffett. His wealth is challenged by by this decentralized technology.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%.
And that's why those people are, and that's why the propaganda exists, because it threatens the wealth.
But it's funny because their subsidiaries will be off buying crypto somewhere. Like, he will have a portfolio of crypto holdings, whether he knows it or he doesn't know it, because if he's hiring smart people, they would already have, diversification of asset and business. It's logic. So, yeah.
Cool. So I think we're approaching the end of our time then, just about now. Robert, let me ask you a question. What are you working on next then? What's coming next from Robert Jamison? I'd like to know.
My interest is in residential. I think residential is or how we live is really is kind of untouched, and of course there are examples of great buildings, great architecture that exists kind of historically, but whenever you go down that rabbit hole of how we occupy space and how we dwell, you start to kind of see the issues or the problems in how we live as kind of impacting on our health and well-being. And ultimately, it's about our health and well-being, because if we're not healthy and well, all we want to do is get better, right? And that becomes our main focus, right? So there's no point in having a beautiful space to live if we're unhealthy. And that's why my push is to kind of like also understand, the importance of finding your health and then dwelling in the space that supports your health, right? I was running a master's unit in Queen's University, and it was called Without Precedent, but like the whole first semester critique the world we live in terms of how we dwell, but also what I call the apparatus of living. The chair, for example, all these objects that are unnatural and unhealthy. You just have to look at kids and how they kind of how they can sit, on the ground or off the ground and on their honkers, and how mobile they are, or look to the east and the other generation that isn't kind of encumbered by this technology, this physical technology that is part of our Western kind of way of looking at, of evolving, right? So I've always kind of I'm interested in not only the apparatus of living, but then, of course, the buildings we inhabit. And I've got some wonderful clients, and I'm exploring these ideas. You home made perfect. I kind of touched on areas of kind of creating what I call landscapes of living, which is an important kind of idea, where rather than kind of like a 3-piece suite of these sofas, these oddities that are neither comfortable nor support the amount of people that they say they do, are really kind of unhealthy, and we shouldn't actually be using them. Whereas if we create landscapes or deep day beds or surfaces that are soft, we can kind of lie on and enjoy that. You see in the East, you see if you go off to other parts of the world, indigenous cultures, how they kind of live and how they kind of occupy surface, then that's how we should be living as a species, right? So my work was also, wrapped up in all of that. I also kind of live in a certain way that where I have my own practices, and my cold water therapy, or indeed kind of my asana practices, or meditation. I think it's important to kind of find space for these, or spaces that are calm, and I'm exploring these with my clients. But I think it's important to really kind of, for me, to create space, because we spend most of our time in our homes, and they need to be healing spaces, which is another thing interestingly about kind of the blockchain, this technology, because this works on a high frequency kind of that is not healthy for us, right? That this here kind of call it 5G, or this here kind of electromagnetic frequencies, they put up these, and again, it's not a conspiracy, it exists, it impacts on our health. It kind of, even in our phones, in the small print, it states that it shouldn't be within an inch of the body. It actually says in the small print of our iPhones, and yet we hold them, and there's issues with cancer and tumors and everything. So it's interesting that kind of we, even the technology we use to kind of enjoy that, these spaces are arguably also kind of impacting on us. But then there's that whole idea of 0 point energy and free energy. And there's a wonderful documentary called The Lost Century. If you look at that, you can really kind of get a hint of how we've evolved in the past century, and the technology that's been taken from us, as a species to evolve, So, but my work is about healing and health and well-being, and I'm interested in working with clients who, want to, support their community or their family and themselves. And then I would like to take that into kind of, different building types. However, in my kind of manifesto, I think that the most successful architecture is that which can't be named, if you like, or we can just occupy it. We can just, spend time within it. And I also see buildings as having their own entity, or kind of spirit, where whilst you have a client and there's the building also deserves something that the client can't give, and that's just its place in a context, So, although I've kind of ideas, I want to create a practice that becomes a school, or a model of organization that can kind of create public spaces and educate at the same time. And I think that I feel that it's through this crypto, this technology, that it's going to allow me to do that, because this other reality that we live in is dying, and I think that we're moving into what I call civilization 2.0, and I really kind of, I'm positive, I'm optimistic. We have to get through this shit, but we will get through it, and I think it's wonderful what lies ahead,
Wow,
amazing.
Some beautiful ideas there, Robert. Thank you. It sounds like ultimately you're not a fan of chairs.
The sit is an interrupted squat. That's famous. I mean, that's a famous Alexander technique, kind of mantra. And we shouldn't be sitting on. And again, these chairs that are celebrated as beautiful kind of pieces of whatever object
material.
They don't support our well-being, But anyway, so that's just
my back's always killing from my chair. I'll give you that.
My neck as well, absolute nightmare all the time, staring ahead of the screen, disaster.
Right.
Yeah.
You need to organise your space a bit better.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah.
I'll send you an email, Rob. I'll ask you, send you a photo of my front room and just see what you can do.
Send me your plans.
Thank you so much, Robert Jamison, for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you and find out more about what you do and why you're interested in the space. Rob, thanks a lot, and thanks to you, Rob, as well. It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much, Rob.
Absolute fascinating.
Thanks you guys, and great what you're doing, and keep doing it. And just thanks for giving me the opportunity just to have a chat, because I'm really interested in this kind of world, and I'll keep following you guys.
Oh, we appreciate it. I think it's like our community and audience will be captivated by you, and as was I, and I think Dan and everyone in the room here. So thank you very much. We'd love to get you back on again at some point in the future.
In the metaverse, so inside.
Yeah, we'll try and do it inside our virtual platform. Yeah, and go for
it. That's
cool. Thank you to Rob. Thanks everyone. Right. Cheers, Rob Jamison.
Take care.
Thank you, mate.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much there to Robert Jamison for coming on Making a Metaverse. And finally, I had an expert to speak with.
You had to come up with something, didn't I?
It's so good to get to know someone that knows a little bit about decentralization, about blockchain, and has some new ideas about it. Don't know about what you thought, Rob.
Oh, mate. Yeah, total legend, I think, massively sort of on my wavelength with his systems of thought.
Bit ahead of your wavelength. Significantly. You're on different wavelengths.
But yeah, no, I mean, I was saying, at the end there, I love what he's doing. He's taking his expertise, his learning, his experiences in architecture and, these types of things, and is applying, the concepts of permissionlessness, ownership, decentralization to them. And I love to kind of hear about those measures, because I think ultimately that's what's going to shift the existing kind of constructs and create new paradigms is experts in their field, educators as well. He's done master's courses, led master's courses, that is going to kind of be part of that new wave of thought and education, and making the connection between, because ultimately, blockchain, it's this disruption, right? It's a vehicle for disruption, but it's what exists in our world now and what is applying to them where it really counts. And he's doing exactly that. So absolute legend, delighted to have him on.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like, what I found interesting was how I was kind of pushing for how do we get people on this journey. He's like, hey, we need a whole new journey. Okay, the existing journey is no longer suitable.
Right.
But listening to you two talk was like listening to a different language at times for me. So it's like, that quote where it's like, if lions could speak English, you wouldn't be able to understand them. I felt like you two were two lions and I was like a seal or something.
Yeah, just showing the north-south divide there, that's all. But it's fine.
Thank you there, Rob, and thank you to Robert as well. 2 Robs for the price of 1. Fantastic.
Lucky this week, yeah.
Thanks everyone to listen to Making a Metaverse. We'll be back with a normal episode next time where we talk about Cryptoverse and what we're up to. But for now, please take part in our competitions, share and like this podcast. Making a Metaverse, over and out.